Well, good afternoon, better get it. So today I woke up with the question in my head of, are you ready for what you prayed for? And after meditating on that for a little while, I decided to put together this little video to sort of help y'all explore that same question for yourselves. Are you ready for what you prayed for? So the scriptures that this little lesson is based on are Proverbs 29 and 18, where there is no vision, the people perish, but he that keepeth the law, happy is he. There are other versions of that said, rather than no vision, it said rather than the people perish, the people are unrestrained or run wild. But he that keepeth the law, happy is he. And then the second scripture, Habakkuk 2 and 2, write the vision and make it plain upon the tables, that he may run that readeth it. And when you're clear on where you're heading, it's easier to move fast. And a good example of that is the GPS that many of us use almost every day. When you're headed someplace that you haven't been before and you have to use the GPS to get there, you tend to go a little slower than you would if you knew where you were going already, because you're listening for the directions every few miles, every turn, etc. Versus when you're very, very clear about where you're headed, it's easier to move faster towards that goal. Whether it's in your day-to-day life where you're driving somewhere, but even in your personal life with your personal goals, the clearer you are on the end result that you want to attain, the easier it is for you to plan and take action to move towards that end result. So what are you praying for? These are some of the most common categories: money, health, love, some people fame, or whatever else. If you're praying for money, do you know how to properly manage your money? If you're praying for health or maybe weight loss, do you eat healthy and exercise? If you're praying for love, are the wounds and trauma from your past affecting your current relationships? Are you ready for the scrutiny that fame brings, if that's something that you're asking for? Whatever it is that you want, your choices and actions need to align with it. It's not enough to just ask for it. Well, maybe it is, depending on your perspective. But what good is it if you ask for it and you get it and you're unprepared to receive it? So think on that for a second. If you're praying for money, a lot of people play the lotto imagining that if they win the lotto, their life will immediately change for the better. It'll solve all their problems. They can buy mom that house. They don't have to work, etc., etc. But the reality is that 70% of lottery winners go bankrupt within the first 5 years after receiving that money. I submit that's because they're unprepared for the wealth that they've fantasized about. You have to prepare for what it is you want. If money is what you want, whether that's through your career or through a windfall, you have to learn to manage what you currently have responsibly, so that if and when that windfall comes or that increase comes, you're prepared to handle it and manage it appropriately so that you can maintain it and ideally grow it. So if you're praying for financial success, assess where you are now. That's the starting point. Too often people want to sit back and fantasize about their future, and great, so you have a vision for that future, but you need a plan to get there. Just like with my earlier GPS analogy, If I'm going to Fort Worth from Dallas, I have to know where I'm starting from in order to get to Fort Worth. If I just hop on the freeway with no context for where I'm at and start driving, I could end up anywhere. Even if I have some context of where Fort Worth is, it's meaningless unless I know where it is relative to where I'm at. So with your money, you have to know where you're starting from, be it small or not. Establish a budget. Make sure you're living within your means. Make sure you're clear about how many income sources you have and how much is going out. Evaluate where you can eliminate waste. Where are you spending money unnecessarily? Like a great example, if you're eating out several times a week, depending on how much of a foodie you are, that can easily be anywhere from $10 to $30 per meal. And so if you're doing that several times a week, that's a lot more money than what you might spend if you bought groceries and prepared that food. So that's an area where, particularly if you're trying to increase your savings and meet some long-term goal, you can cut back and save money. You're still eating, you're not going hungry, but you can make small changes to help you reach your goal. Educate yourself on how you can better manage your finances. There are tons of free resources online. I took Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace course several years ago, and I was already doing, fairly well financially. I'm not wealthy, I'm not rich, but I have a home, I had a car, I was doing all right. But when I took that course, it really exposed where I was being wasteful. One of the big things that I was doing that Dave Ramsey points out in his teachings is, particularly with the middle class, middle income folks, cars is an area where we waste a lot of money, where we're buying or leasing cars every few years versus buying one that's used. And for that matter, versus buying one and paying in full versus having a car payment. So that was an area where I made the change and started saving my money to buy a car in full for the first time in my life. What an experience. I cannot tell you how wonderful it is not to have a car payment. And don't get me wrong, I get the itch every now and then to get something new, maybe a little fancier. But then I think about that car payment that I don't have, and it helps me change my mind real quick. So establish goals as to what you want. And once you have that goal, you backtrack and budget and figure out what is it going to take to reach that. Plan the work, figure out what you need to do, and work the plan. As you make steps towards that goal, you might have to rework it and tweak it a little bit. And another example is when you're eliminating waste in your finances in particular. That money that you save as you pay off debt that you were paying interest on, or as you make small changes so that you're not spending as much, you can invest that money somewhere else. With the food example, if you start cooking and maybe limiting going out to maybe once or twice a week as opposed to 3 to 5 times a week, that money you save can go towards paying off some debt that you have. If you don't have debt, then that can be going into your savings to help you towards some goal that you might have elsewhere. So plan the work and work the plan. If you're praying for health, a lot of dieters regain the weight. Just as an example, nearly 65% of dieters return to their pre-dieting weight within 3 years. In fact, it's even worse for many of the folks that lose weight rapidly. Only 5% of people who lose weight on a crash diet will keep the weight off. I can most certainly attest to that. Many years ago, I did a liquid diet, and I lost 35 pounds. I can't remember. I want to say it was maybe in 3 months. Within that same year, I gained not only that back, but I gained 70 pounds. Because the reality was, I was doing something that wasn't maintainable. And so a lot of times, particularly with our health, in many areas, we look for those shortcuts, thinking that that's the cure-all, be-all. Weight loss surgery is a great example. I've had weight loss surgery, but weight loss surgery is a tool. It's not the ultimate end-all, be-all. You still have to put in the work. You still have to make healthy choices. You still have to exercise if you ultimately want to reach your goal. That surgery makes it a little bit easier to control yourself and maintain, I can't even say maintain. It gives you a tool to work with that makes it more difficult for you to overeat. However, it does not prevent you from making bad choices. It still comes down to you have to choose according to where you want to be. And if you're not doing that, if you get weight loss surgery, great, you lose 50 pounds, 100 pounds. But if you're still eating fried chicken several times a week and French fries, I promise you that weight's going to come back because you're not making choices that are in line with maintaining a healthy weight for yourself. So you've got to choose better in order to attain that goal. So again, if you're praying for better health, assess where you are now. We're all different. We have different strengths and weaknesses. Just like when you're setting out on a trip to go somewhere, if you're setting out to, let's say, lose 100 pounds, you've got to have a plan. But you've also got to know where you are today so that you can be clear on where your obstacles and challenges are going to be. Consult with people that know and can help you. See your doctor, get a physical so that you know if you have any conditions that would prevent you from exercising regularly or aggressively. If you don't know how to eat healthy or what to eat to help you lose weight, consider getting a nutritionist. If that's not something that you can afford, you can always educate yourself. There are tons of videos, exercise videos, nutrition videos, videos on how to cook healthy meals, tons of examples of people that have transformed their health, their bodies by eating healthier and doing various exercises. Just Google it on YouTube. There are tons of them. But you, again, have to take that action to learn more so that you can do better. Then establish some reasonable health goals. Don't try to lose 50 pounds in 1 month, because whatever you're doing to reach a goal like that is very stressful on your body, and it's most likely not maintainable. So, if you consult a doctor, if you consult a nutritionist, a normal healthy amount of weight to lose per week is somewhere around 2 pounds. Now, that it might be higher in, at the beginning of your journey. But for the most part, 2 pounds a week is a healthy speed to lose weight at. So make sure that your goals are reasonable. If your goal is to lower your blood pressure, that means you have to lower your salt intake. So there are lots of different things that you can do. You just have to figure out, what is it that you're trying to obtain? What are the health goals that you want to attain? Is it losing weight? Or maybe if you're really thin, there are people that are skinny fat. Just because you're small doesn't mean you're healthy. So That's why you need a physical, and you want to consult with experts to assess where you are and where you can improve your overall health. Just like with finances, you plan the work, meaning you figure out what it is you need to do, and then you work the plan. You do it. If you're praying for love, what percentage of marriages end in divorce? According to recent statistics, researchers estimate that 40 to 50% of all first marriages will end in divorce or permanent separation, and about 60 to 65% of second marriages will end in divorce. The problem is the same in each of these areas. If you're praying for love, it starts with you. You have to be prepared for whatever it is you're asking for. Learn to love yourself. Yeah, I'm sure you guys have heard this before. We teach people how to love us. And if you don't know how to love yourself, you can't expect anybody else to do it for you. What negative patterns are you seeing in your relationships? Are a lot of your relationships short, brief? Are they ending suddenly with no explanation? Is there a lot of drama and arguments? Whatever those patterns are, start identifying them again so you can figure out where you need to do some work. What wounds from your past are repeating in your life today? You know, this is a big one for me, and I'll say, you know, I had issues with self-worth. I had issues because I believed I had to earn love. So I was always performing, trying to do my way into being accepted. And unbeknownst to me, that put people off and caused them to not trust me because I was doing to get. It was something I did almost subconsciously. I didn't know that's what I thought I was doing a good thing. I'm helping, I'm serving, I'm doing this, that, and the other. But it wasn't until I started seeing patterns that I didn't want. You know, there was someone that I really liked. It didn't work out. It kind of ended without much of an explanation. And I saw where in the beginning of the relationship, he was just amazed by me, but within a very short amount of time, he took me for granted. And it was through counseling that I learned that my behavior was a large factor in that. Not excusing him, because he did what he did, but the reality was I was trying to earn his love. I was trying to earn his appreciation. And in doing that, I devalued myself. Because had I valued myself in the beginning, I wouldn't have been trying to earn his love. I would have already known I was worthy of it, and I wouldn't have needed to be extra cooking and, you know, helping with this, that, and the other. But because really that was coming out of a place of fear that I would lose him. It wasn't coming out of a place of love. It wasn't coming out of a secure place. And so ultimately it ended up pushing him away. I'm sure he didn't even know why, because later he tried to tip back, but no thanks now. But I had to learn not to give myself away. And I learned much of that through counseling. The counseling helped me identify where my behavior was causing an undesired response from people. And so the next phase in that was digging down and learning, well, where did that behavior come from? Where did I learn to do and act that way? And I figured a lot of that out actually during this pandemic. And I had to identify and see that I can't change anyone else. That's a given. but I can change how I respond and interact with others. So in the example I gave, if I were to enter a similar relationship like that again, I know not to give myself away. I know now that if I want a masculine man, someone that's going to take lead in the relationship and be a protector, provider, etc., then I have to respond and conduct myself a certain way in order to facilitate the behavior that I want and the type of relationship that I want. Because ultimately, whatever you start out doing, you have to keep doing in order to keep what you get. So if you get a person through servitude, don't expect that to stop after you get them. And if you're serving someone out of fear rather than out of love, what happens is you start to resent them. You get tired because they're not pouring back. You're pouring out. And only a fraction of what you're pouring out is coming back. You get tired, you get worn down, you get resentful because ultimately you're not getting what you think you deserve. And in my example, I was half the problem. Because, so anyway, that's a whole nother lesson in itself. If you're praying for love, daily affirmations can also be very helpful. They can be helpful in any one of these areas. And that's really just speaking to yourself positive things, speaking into your life what you want to happen, what you want to be. That, just like, we're encouraged in church, learn the word, speak the word over your life. If there's a particular area you're struggling with, look up scriptures related to that area. Learn what God says about it. If you're not a Christian, fine. Learn positive things, positive ways to reach the goal that you have, and speak those things into your life. Educate yourself on how to love in a healthy way. Just like with finances, just like with health, there are lots and lots of videos on relationships, on how to find love, on how to improve your self-worth, how to be more confident, but you've got to do the work, and you've got to believe for it. Fame, that's, these days there's so much going on with social media. A lot of people are praying for fame in one way or another, or popularity, to say it a different way. Unfortunately, the constant attention that comes with fame has a reverse effect oftentimes, because you don't realize as you become more famous the type of scrutiny that puts you under, because you're putting out a certain presentation to people, and if that's not the real you, one, it can affect your self-esteem because you feel like you're being a fake, or two, even if it is the real you, if you slip up, it's one thing to slip up by yourself, nobody knows about it. It's another thing to slip up and the world knows about it. It's news somewhere. The cost of fame is well documented. It's not endless adulation, wealth, or eternal happiness, but oftentimes it can breed insecurity, fear, and loneliness. If you think about a lot of, there are lots of famous people that have committed suicide, or become drug addicts or alcoholics because of that pressure to constantly perform and present a certain way. It can become overwhelming when you don't feel like you can live up to the persona that you've created for yourself, that persona that fed that popularity. So, one way to deal with that is just be real. I'm trying to be real. I have no makeup on. My hair's not my hair's done. It's not like, but be yourself. you don't have to be anything but yourself, and love yourself. And when you do that and you balance your life, then it's a lot easier to be happy with whatever situation you find yourself in. So whatever it is that you want, whatever it is that you're praying for, everything comes at a price. You know, there's constant trade-offs and choices that we have to make to get where we're trying to go. You can pay a little at a time. You know, I'll use another analogy. A lot of times when we don't want to pay that price up front, it costs more because now there's interest. You know, just like with the car situation. Let's say, oh, I want a new car. Well, sure, I could go out and get a Benz or a Beamer or whatever, and you know, have to pay thousands of dollars for that car, but I don't have the cash in the bank. I can still get the car, but now I'm going to pay interest on top of that normal price. So let's say it's a $40,000 car, and I only have $5,000. Well, that means I've got to finance $35,000. So now I'm paying a lender some amount of interest every month on top of the car's price. So maybe instead of $40,000, I'm really paying somewhere around $50,000 when you factor in the interest on that loan that I would have to get over an extended period of time. You know, but at the end of the day, you know, what is it that I really want? If I really want that car, maybe I'm willing to extend myself like that. But if I step back and I prepare for it, let's say rather than borrowing money, I just continue to save. You know, one of Dave Ramsey's recommendations that I took was instead of buying new, you can buy a used car. Or, you know, ultimately buy a car that you can pay off immediately, that you can pay for up front. So rather than getting the expensive bougie car that I may have wanted, I had something small. I had a very tiny Prius that got excellent gas mileage. It was very inexpensive, and I was saving money on gas too. And you know, when I decided I wanted a bigger car, I saved up. And so then I traded that car in, and I had the money saved to pay the difference. Again, I can't tell you how wonderful it was not to have that car payment and not to be paying interest, paying more for something, knowing it's not worth more. I'm paying for that lack of preparation, essentially. And that the same is true in all of these areas. You know, I can certainly attest for it with my health. Gosh, I wish I had lost the 100 pounds I lost 30 years ago or 20 years ago. I can only imagine what my life might have been. I'd probably be married with kids for one, but that ship has sailed, at least the kid part. Let's hope it's sailed. I'm speaking that into that ship has sailed. But if, you know, my life would have been so much different and probably a lot fuller had I known, had I educated myself on how to lose the weight. You know, I struggled many years when I was younger with depression. I was so frustrated with being single, and food was one of the ways that I escaped from that. And so it was a vicious cycle, because ultimately there were underlying issues there, because I had childhood wounds that caused me to question my self-worth. I behaved in such a way that didn't facilitate the kind of relationships that I wanted. I behaved in such, because I didn't value myself and I performed for love, I ended up in a lot of relationships where I got used or taken for granted. And at the end of that, you end up being resentful, it doesn't work out, etc. So I say all that to say, you know, figure out what it is you want, and figure out what it is you need to do to get there. Your actions need to align with whatever it is those goals are. Even if it's love, you know, figure out, what do you think is blocking you? Look at those patterns in your relationships and try and work with someone, work with a professional to figure out how to change whatever negative patterns that you see. If it's weight loss, if it's health, you're not just going to magically have a great body. You've got to put in the work to get there. Even if you have surgeries, you still have to do work to get there. There's still a price to be paid. And the price of doing nothing is usually more than what you realize. When you sit back and are indecisive, you don't see what you're losing during that time. That's the piece we don't factor in. Too often we think that, I can deal with that tomorrow, I can deal with that tomorrow. And, I'll use my weight loss as an example. If I had lost that weight sooner, I might not have some of the knee issues that I have now had I addressed the larger problem sooner. But my focus was wrong. I was dealing with an external. I thought too often we try to get externally what we need internally. And let me say that a different way. We'll look externally for something that we need internally. So in my case, loving myself was the key, and allowing myself to heal, identifying those wounds and healing and confronting some of those issues. That was really the root of what allowed me to finally overcome some of my weight loss issues. And then when I got counseling, I started to see that pattern, it wasn't just with my weight. It wasn't just in my relationships. It was also in my career. That people-pleasing pattern, it actually went, it bode well for me in a career standpoint because it caused me to excel. I was a perfectionist. I was a workaholic. But the flip side of that, the cost, the price, was relationships and connection because I was always working. So anyway, I could go on, but I see I'm just over 30 minutes, so I'll stop here and challenge you to ask yourself, are you ready for what you prayed for? And if not, start figuring out what you need to do to get ready. Because God doesn't bless mess. So anyway, until next time, you better get it.